Raymond's house always smelled like success. Leather furniture, expensive candles, and that particular scent of money that seems to cling to marble countertops and custom cabinetry. November 2018, and I was 22 years old, standing in his Denver mansion's foyer with Mom and my sister Nora, holding a store-bought pumpkin pie, because that's what we could afford. "Anders, Claire, get in here." Raymond's voice boomed from the dining room, already carrying that loose, jovial tone that meant he'd started drinking early. My uncle had inherited Dad's construction business when Dad died, then parlayed it into real estate development. Everything Raymond touched turned to gold, or at least that's what he told everyone at every family gathering. Mom smoothed her dress, the navy blue one she wore to job interviews and church, the only nice dress she owned anymore. 6 months since the divorce was finalized. 6 months since she'd lost the house, the car, everything except her dignity and her kids. She was living in a 400-square-foot studio apartment in Aurora now, the kind of place with weekly rent options and thin walls that let you hear your neighbors' entire lives. "You look beautiful, Mom," I whispered, meaning it. Claire Beck at 48 had the kind of quiet strength that divorce couldn't break, even when it tried its hardest. The dining room was a showcase of Raymond's wealth. Crystal glasses caught the light from an honest-to-God chandelier. The table could seat 12, laden with food that probably cost more than Mom's monthly rent. Theo, my cousin, barely looked up from his phone as we entered. He was 20, Raymond's only son, and currently filming himself for Instagram Live while showing off his new Audi keys. "Look at this beauty," Theo was saying to his phone screen, dangling the keys. "Early Christmas present from Dad. Fully loaded, leather interior, premium sound system. Living the dream, guys." I felt Mom tense beside me. Not jealousy, Mom wasn't built that way, but awareness. The sharp recognition of just how different our worlds had become. "Theo, put that away. We have company," said Janet, Raymond's wife, though her smile was strained. She'd always been kind to us, in that careful way people are kind to relatives they pity. We found our seats. Mom between Nora and me, like we'd unconsciously formed a protective barrier. The conversation flowed around us. Theo's college plans, Raymond's latest development project, Janet's charity work. Normal family dinner talk, except we weren't really part of it anymore. We were the audience, the reminder of what happens when life goes wrong. I watched Mom cut her turkey into precise, small pieces. She'd always been methodical like that, even when we were kids and she was managing Dad's books for the construction company. Numbers person, detail-oriented, never wasted anything. Those skills were serving her well now, stretching every dollar until it screamed. "So, Claire," Raymond said, setting down his wine glass with a soft clink against the table. The conversation had lulled, and something in his tone made everyone look up. "How are you settling into that new place? The one off Colfax?" Mom's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "It's fine, Ray. Small, but it works." "Small?" Raymond nodded, like he was considering this. "How small are we talking? Studio?" "Yes." Theo looked up from his phone for the first time all evening, suddenly interested. Nora's hand found mine under the table, her fingers cold. "Weekly rates, right?" Raymond continued, his voice getting that particular edge it took on when he thought he was being clever. "I mean, that's what those places do. Weekly rent because the tenants can't qualify for regular leases." The table went quiet except for the soft classical music playing from hidden speakers. "Raymond," Janet said quietly, a warning. But Raymond was on a roll now, wine and his own sense of superiority mixing into something ugly. "I was just thinking, you know? Studio apartment, weekly rates, no equity, living paycheck to paycheck." He gestured vaguely with his glass. "I mean, your mom is kind of homeless now, yes?" The words hit the table like a physical blow. I felt my body go completely still, the way it does right before you either fight or run. Mom's face flushed red, and she stared down at her hands folded in her lap. "What?" Raymond laughed, looking around the table like he expected others to join in. "I'm not trying to be mean. I read an article about housing insecurity. Technically, anyone without permanent housing stability is considered housing insecure. That's basically homeless by modern definitions." Nora made a small sound, like she'd been hit. When I looked at her, Tears were streaming down her 18-year-old face. "Dad, stop," Theo said quietly, but he was still holding his phone, still filming. "I'm just saying," Raymond continued, oblivious or not caring. "It's good that we can help out. Family takes care of family, right? That's why we invited you. Give Claire a real meal, somewhere warm to spend the holiday." Mom's hands were shaking now. Barely visible, but I could see it. The woman who had worked 2 jobs to keep us fed after Dad died, who had managed his business books for free for 15 years, who had never once asked Raymond for help even when the divorce left her with nothing. She was shaking. I set down my fork. The sound seemed unnaturally loud in the sudden quiet. Everyone was looking at me now. Raymond with his flushed face and wine-glazed eyes, Janet with horror at what her husband had just said, Theo still half-focused on his phone screen, Nora crying silently. I looked at Mom. Really looked at her. Her face was burning with shame, staring at her lap like she could disappear into it. This woman who had taught me that dignity wasn't about what you owned. It was about how you carried yourself. This woman who had never once complained about the divorce, the tiny apartment, the job at the accounting firm that paid half what she was worth. I stood up. "Anders?" Mom's voice was small. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? That Raymond was wrong? That Mom wasn't homeless, she was just starting over? That a studio apartment wasn't a mansion, but it was clean and safe and she was proud of it? None of that would matter. Not to Raymond, not right now. He'd already decided what our story was. I looked at Raymond one more time. He was watching me with this expression like he was waiting for me to thank him for the lesson, for the reality check. Instead, I walked out. I heard chairs scraping behind me, Mom and Nora following. Janet calling after us, her voice full of mortification. Theo asking if he should stop filming. We ended up at Denny's. The 3 of us in a booth with cracked vinyl seats, sharing a turkey dinner special and trying to pretend it was normal. Nora was still crying quietly, and Mom kept apologizing, like Raymond's cruelty was somehow her fault. I should have said something, I told them, cutting into rubbery turkey under fluorescent lights. "No," Mom said firmly. "Some people aren't worth your words, Anders. They've already decided what they think. Nothing you say will change that." But sitting there, watching my mom try to make the best of Thanksgiving at Denny's while Raymond was probably back at his mansion telling everyone how dramatic we were, I made a decision. I wouldn't defend Mom with words anymore. Words were cheap, and people like Raymond didn't listen to them anyway. I would defend her with action. The morning after that, Denny's Thanksgiving, I woke up on Mom's pull-out couch in her studio apartment. The walls were thin enough that I could hear her neighbor's television through the drywall. Mom was already up, sitting at her tiny kitchen table with a cup of coffee and her laptop, working on some clients' books even though it was Friday after Thanksgiving. She looked up when she heard me stirring. "Sleep okay?" "Yeah." I sat up, folding the blanket. The apartment was maybe 400 square feet total. You could see everything from everywhere. "Mom, about yesterday." "We're not talking about yesterday." She turned back to her laptop. "We're talking about tomorrow." That's when I knew. Mom wasn't going to spend the next 5 years explaining herself to people who'd already decided what she was worth. She was going to spend them proving it to herself. I made a decision right there on that pull-out couch. I wasn't going to defend Mom with words anymore. Words were what Uncle Raymond used to cut people down. I was going to defend her with action. The plan started simple. I had 2 jobs, property management for a small company downtown, and night security at a warehouse in Commerce City. The property management job paid decent, around $45,000 a year. Security was another 18. Between both jobs, I was pulling in about $63,000 annually, which wasn't bad for a 22-year-old with a community college degree. But here's what Uncle Raymond didn't know about our family. We weren't afraid of work. Dad had taught me that before he died when I was 16. Work isn't punishment, Anders. It's compound interest on your character. I started giving Mom 30% of everything I made. Not because she asked, she never would have, but because I could live on the rest, and she had something I didn't. A mind for numbers that could turn 30% into 60, then 60 into 120. Mom had always been good with money. When she was married to Dad, she managed their finances and somehow always made the mortgage payments, even when Dad's construction work got slow in winter. But after the divorce, when she lost everything in the settlement, she discovered she wasn't just good with money, she was brilliant with it. She started taking online courses in financial planning. Real ones, from actual universities. Not those get-rich-quick seminars that promise you'll be wealthy in 90 days. Mom studied portfolio theory and tax law and market analysis like she was training for the Olympics. By year 2, she'd landed a consulting gig helping other divorced women rebuild their finances. By year 3, she was featured in a Denver Post article about financial recovery after divorce. Her income went from $28,000 that first year to $65,000 the second, then $90,000 the third. But the real magic happened when we combined forces. I got my real estate license in year 2. Started small, tiny flips in neighborhoods that reminded me of where we grew up. Houses that needed work but had good bones. Mom would run the numbers, analyze the market comparables, calculate renovation costs down to the penny. I'd do the physical work, most of it anyway. We'd contract out the electrical and plumbing, but I could handle demo, drywall, paint, basic carpentry. Our first flip was a disaster. We made maybe $3,000 after 6 months of work. But we learned. The second one, we made $8,000. The third, $15,000. By year 4, we weren't just flipping houses. We were buying rental properties. Mom had this theory about real estate that I'd never heard anywhere else. She called it dignity investing. Instead of buying the cheapest properties in the worst neighborhoods, we bought decent properties in working-class areas. Places where people took care of their lawns and painted their fences and wanted their kids to walk to school safely. Slumlords make money, she told me one evening as we reviewed potential properties on her laptop. But they make it off other people's desperation. We're going to make money off other people's aspirations. We bought our first rental property in year 3. A 3-bedroom ranch in Wheat Ridge for $130,000. Fixed it up, painted it soft blue with white trim, put in new appliances. Rented it to a young family for $1,400 a month. The husband was a mechanic. The wife worked at a daycare. They had a 2-year-old daughter who loved the little backyard we'd fenced in. When they moved in, the wife actually cried. "It's the nicest place we've ever lived," she told Mom. That's when I understood what Mom meant about dignity investing. We weren't just making money. We were providing something people were proud to call home. Uncle Raymond, meanwhile, had no idea any of this was happening. We'd see him at family gatherings, Christmas, Easter, 4th of July, barbecues at Grandma's house. He'd ask how we were doing in that way that wasn't really asking. "How's the little apartment, Claire?" "Anders, still doing the security guard thing?" Mom would smile and say, "We're doing well, thank you." I'd nod and change the subject. Raymond would talk about his latest development projects, the new office building downtown, the subdivision he was planning in Castle Rock. Theo would show off whatever car he was driving that month. Always something European, always financed through Dad's company. They never asked follow-up questions about our lives, which made it easy to stay quiet about what we were building. By year 4, we had 6 rental properties across the Denver metro area. Mom's consulting practice was bringing in $140,000 annually. I'd left the security job and was working property management full-time while handling our real estate investments. We formed an LLC, Beck & Beck Properties. Mom and me, 50-50 partners. That's when we found the Evergreen property. It was listed as a tear-down opportunity on 4 acres of lakefront land. The house was from the 1970s, all dark wood paneling and orange shag carpet. The roof leaked, the foundation had settling issues, and the septic system was failing. But the land was perfect. 4 acres on Evergreen Lake, with mature pine trees and 300 feet of shoreline. The listing price was $425,000, which was actually reasonable for lakefront property in the mountains, even with a house that needed to be demolished. Mom and I drove up there on a Saturday morning in March. Snow still covered the ground, but you could see the potential. The lake stretched out in front of us, surrounded by mountains that looked like a postcard. "We could build here," Mom said quietly. We were standing where the old house's living room used to be, looking out through a broken window at the water. "It would take everything we have," I said, "and probably more." "Yes?" She was quiet for a long moment. "But Anders, look where we are. I looked around. At the mountains, the lake, the trees. At my mom, who 5 years earlier had been living in a studio apartment where you could hear the neighbor's TV through the walls. "Let's do it," I said. We bought the property in April 2021, spent that summer tearing down the old house ourselves. Well, mostly me, with mom handling the permits and contractor coordination. We designed the new house together, working with an architect who specialized in mountain contemporary style. The house we built was nothing like Uncle Raymond's mansion. His place was all about showing off. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, rooms that nobody actually used. Our house was about living. 4,500 square feet, but every room had a purpose. Floor-to-ceiling windows facing the lake. A kitchen designed for actual cooking, not just catering. A master suite for mom with a reading nook where she could watch the sunrise over the water. We also built a small guest house for Nora, who was finishing college and wanted a place to stay when she visited. The whole project took 2 years and cost us nearly everything we'd saved. But we paid for most of it in cash, taking only a small construction loan that we paid off within 6 months of completion. Mom moved in during summer 2023. I kept my apartment in Denver, closer to work, and I liked having my own space. But I spent most weekends at the lake house. Uncle Raymond had no idea any of this was happening. As far as he knew, Mom was still struggling in that studio apartment, and I was still working security somewhere. The silence wasn't strategic exactly. It just felt right. Why would we tell people who'd made it clear they thought we were failures? Why would we seek approval from someone who'd called Mom kinda homeless and thought it was funny? Mom put it best one evening as we sat on her deck watching the sunset over Evergreen Lake. Some people earn the right to know about your life. Others forfeit it. I thought about Dad sometimes, wondering what he would have thought about the house, about the business we'd built. He'd always been proud of honest work, but he'd never had the chance to see work turn into wealth. I think he would have liked knowing that Mom and I did it together, that we took care of each other. The irony wasn't lost on me that we'd built something bigger than Uncle Raymond's development projects. Beck and Beck Properties owned 12 rental units across 3 counties. Our combined net worth had crossed $2 million. Mom's consulting practice was booked 6 months out. But the real victory wasn't the money. It was watching Mom transform from someone who'd lost everything in a divorce to someone who helped other women avoid the same fate. It was seeing her confidence return, her laugh get easier, her shoulders straighten when she walked. It was knowing that when Uncle Raymond had tried to make her feel small, she'd used that energy to become larger than he could have imagined. We just never told him about it. The drive to Evergreen took 43 minutes. I'd made this trip hundreds of times over the past 2 years, but today felt different. The mountains looked sharper against the October sky, like someone had adjusted the contrast on reality itself. My phone buzzed constantly in the cup holder. Family group chat notifications I'd had muted for 5 years suddenly demanding my attention. I pulled into the circular driveway and sat for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled. The house rose before me like something from Architectural Digest, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows that reflected the aspen trees turning gold around the property. 4,500 square feet of quiet dignity that Mom and I had built board by board, investment by investment, over 3 years of careful planning. The irony wasn't lost on me. Raymond had called Mom kinda homeless in this same house's previous incarnation, a falling-down 1970s cabin with a leaking roof and rotting deck. We'd bought the whole 4-acre lot for $425,000, demolished everything, and started over. Just like Mom had done with her life. I found her in the kitchen, standing at the island with her laptop open, reading something on the screen. She looked up when I walked in, and I could see the tension in her shoulders despite her composed expression. "Theo's Instagram post?" I asked. "Nora forwarded it to me 20 minutes ago." Mom's voice was steady, but her fingers drummed once against the granite countertop. 47 likes already. The comments are interesting. I walked around to look at the screen. There it was, a photo of our house taken from the road, all dramatic angles and expensive landscaping. The caption read, "Goals. Someday I'll own something like this. Evergreen, our lake life, our dreams." The comments were a mix of heart-eye emojis and questions. "Where is this? Whose house? Theo, you're Your dad builds houses like this, right? He doesn't know it's ours yet, I said. Mom closed the laptop with a soft click. He will soon enough. Property records are public. We stood in silence for a moment. Through the massive windows facing the lake, I could see a pair of kayakers paddling past, their bright yellow boats cutting through water that reflected the sky like polished metal. This was what we'd bought. Not just the house, but this view, this peace, this sense of having made it to somewhere safe. Are you ready for this? I asked. Mom walked to the window and pressed her palm against the glass. I've been ready since Thanksgiving 2018. I just didn't know what this would look like. My phone rang, Raymond's name on the screen. Don't answer it, Mom said without turning around. I wasn't going to. The call went to voicemail. Then rang again immediately. He's persistent, I muttered, declining the second call. He always was. Your father used to say Raymond could wear down a glacier just by talking to it. The third call came 30 seconds later. This time I answered. Anders, thank God. Listen, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be straight with me. Raymond's voice had that forced, casual tone he used when he was trying to control a situation. I'd heard it at every family gathering for 20 years, the voice of a man who believed his money made him the family patriarch by default. What do you want, Raymond? Theo's at some property in Evergreen. Says the mailbox has Beck on it. Big modern house on the lake. You know anything about that? I looked at Mom. She'd turned from the window and was watching me with those calm gray eyes that had gotten us through the worst year of our lives. I know about it. Well, whose is it? Check the property records if you're curious. Anders, don't play games with me. Is this some kind of joke? Because if you and Claire are house-sitting for someone... I hung up. The silence in the kitchen felt different now, charged with the electricity of a storm that had been building for 5 years. Mom walked to the coffee maker and started a fresh pot, her movements precise and unhurried. He'll look it up, she said. I know. Then he'll come here. I know. She turned to face me, leaning against the counter with her arms crossed. What do you want to happen when he does? It was a good question. For 5 years, I'd imagined this moment, the day Raymond would discover what we'd built. In my fantasies, it played out a dozen different ways. Sometimes I was cold and dismissive. Sometimes I was gracious and magnanimous. Sometimes I laid out every detail of his cruelty and watched him squirm. But now that the moment was here, I realized I didn't want any of those things. I just wanted him to understand what he'd cost himself. I want him to see what dignity looks like, I said finally. Mom smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her all day. Then we wait. We didn't have to wait long. 47 minutes later, a silver BMW X7 pulled into our driveway. Raymond got out slowly, like a man walking into a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided. He stood by his car for a full minute, staring up at the house. I watched him from the living room window. He looked older than I remembered, grayer, softer, around the middle. The expensive casual clothes couldn't hide the fact that success had made him comfortable in ways that didn't serve him well. When he finally walked to the front door, I was waiting. I opened it before he could knock. Raymond. Jesus Christ, Anders. He was looking past me into the house, at the soaring ceilings, the custom millwork, the art Mom had started collecting. This is really yours? It's Mom's house. I helped build it. Build it how? Where did you get this kind of money? The same place you got yours, work. That stopped him. Raymond had inherited his construction company from his father, along with enough capital to expand into real estate development. He'd never built anything from nothing, never had to choose between groceries and rent, never sat in a Denny's on Thanksgiving because he couldn't stomach watching his mother be humiliated. I want to talk to Claire, he said. She doesn't want to talk to you. You don't speak for her. No, but I know her well enough to know that some conversations aren't worth having. Raymond's face was flushing red, the way it always did when he didn't get what he wanted immediately. Look, I came here to apologize. What I said at Thanksgiving was wrong. I was drunk. I was stressed about the market. I said something stupid. But this, he gestured at the house. This is incredible. I had no idea you two were doing so well. Because you never asked. I'm asking now. 5 years too late. Behind me, I heard footsteps on the hardwood. Mom appeared beside me, not quite in the doorway but visible from where Raymond stood. She didn't say anything, just looked at him with that same calm expression she'd worn the day she signed her divorce papers. Raymond straightened up, putting on his most sincere face. Claire, I owe you an apology. What I said about you being homeless was completely out of line. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Mom tilted her head slightly, studying him like he was a puzzle with missing pieces. You called me kinda homeless in front of our entire family, she said quietly. Made it a joke. Got laughs. I was drunk. You were honest. Drunk people don't lie, Raymond. They just say what they really think without the filter. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Raymond shifted his weight from foot to foot, clearly expecting more. Forgiveness, invitation inside, some kind of reconciliation scene that would let him feel better about himself. Instead, Mom stepped back from the doorway. Thank you for the apology, she said, but I think we're done here. She walked away, disappearing back into the house. I could hear her footsteps fading toward the kitchen. Raymond stared after her, then looked at me. That's it? That's it. Come on, Anders. I apologized. I admitted I was wrong. What more does she want? I stepped outside and pulled the door closed behind me. Raymond backed up instinctively, and I realized he was actually afraid of me. This man who'd spent my entire life talking down to my family was suddenly nervous about being alone with me on my own property. She wants nothing from you, I said. That's what you don't understand. For 5 years you thought we were struggling, thought we needed your help, your approval, your occasional charitable thoughts about the poor relatives. You never once wondered if maybe we were doing fine without you. But why didn't you tell us? Why keep it secret? Because it wasn't about you. We didn't build this to prove anything to you or anyone else. We built it because Mom deserved better than that studio apartment, and I was going to make sure she got it. Raymond looked around the property, at the guest house where Nora stayed when she visited, at the 3-car garage, at the landscaped gardens Mom had designed herself. His developer's eye was calculating square footage, lot value, construction costs. This had to cost $2 million. Easy, he said. Try 2.1. How? I mean, what do you do for work? Property management, real estate. Mom does financial consulting. Financial consulting? Raymond's voice cracked slightly. Claire does financial consulting? Specializes in helping divorced women rebuild wealth. She's been featured in the Denver Post twice. Has a waiting list of clients. I watched him process this information. The Claire he knew was a bookkeeper who'd lost everything in a messy divorce. The idea that she'd not only recovered but become successful enough to own lakefront property was clearly rearranging his entire understanding of our family dynamics. I had no idea, he said finally. Because you never looked. You saw what you expected to see and stopped there. A loon called across the lake, its voice echoing off the water. The sound made Raymond jump slightly, reminding me that he was a city man who'd never been comfortable in the mountains despite his wealth. So what now? He asked. We just pretend this conversation never happened? We don't pretend anything. You go back to your life and we continue with ours. Nothing changes except now you know. The family's going to have questions. Theo's post is all over social media. Then you'll have to figure out how to answer them. I turned to go back inside, but Raymond's voice stopped me. Anders, wait. I know I screwed up. But we're family. Doesn't that count for something? I looked back at him, standing there in his expensive clothes next to his expensive car on the property Mom and I had built with our own hands and careful planning. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Family is what you do, not what you are, I said. And you did nothing when it mattered. 5 years. That's how long it took for everything to unravel in a single Instagram post. I was installing new cabinet hardware in the guest house when my phone buzzed. Nora's text, "Check the family group chat, now." I hadn't looked at that chat in years, had it muted since 2019, but curiosity won, and I scrolled up to see what had everyone so worked up. There it was. Theo's Instagram story, screenshot, and shared by my cousin Jessica. A photo of our house taken from the lake with the caption "Goals" and a location tag, Evergreen, Colorado. My stomach dropped, not because I was ashamed of what we'd built, but because I knew what was coming next. The phone rang. Mom. Anders, honey, we need to talk. I saw it. Theo posted the house. Your uncle's been calling me for 20 minutes straight. I haven't answered. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the tension underneath. He's going to want explanations. You don't owe him anything, Mom. I know that. But he's going to come here anyway. You know Raymond. She was right. Uncle Raymond never did anything quietly, and he sure wasn't going to start now. I grabbed my keys and drove the 15 minutes from downtown Evergreen to our place, taking the winding mountain road that still felt surreal to call home. The house sat on 4 acres of pristine lakefront, modern glass and steel that reflected the water like a mirror. We'd designed it ourselves, Mom and I, during those long nights at her old studio apartment. She'd sketch floor plans on graph paper while I researched building codes and permits. Every decision was ours, every dollar earned. I pulled into the circular driveway just as a familiar black BMW came roaring up behind me. Raymond's car, the same one he'd had detailed every week for the past decade. He got out slowly, staring at the house like he'd never seen architecture before. His mouth was actually hanging open. Anders? He walked toward me, hands in his expensive suit pockets. We need to talk. No, we don't. I positioned myself between him and the front door. You're not welcome here. Look, I know I said some things. You said my mom was kind of homeless, in front of the entire family, made it a joke for everyone to laugh at. His face flushed red. I was drunk. It was Thanksgiving. Everyone was drinking. Mom wasn't drinking. Nora wasn't drinking. I wasn't drinking. We were just trying to get through dinner with family. The words came out steady, controlled. 5 years of thinking about this moment had taught me not to yell. You humiliated her because it made you feel bigger. Raymond looked past me at the house, those floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the open living space. How did you afford this? The property records show you paid cash for most of it. The same way you afforded yours. Work. I crossed my arms. Except we didn't inherit a construction company from Grandpa. That's not... He stopped himself, probably realizing that arguing about his advantages wasn't going to help his case. I want to apologize to your mother. 5 years late. Better late than never, right? I studied his face, looking for something genuine beneath the desperation. You can try, but she decides if she wants to hear it. He nodded quickly like a man grabbing at any lifeline. I stepped aside and watched him walk toward the house, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the slate walkway we'd installed ourselves last spring. Through the massive windows, I could see Mom in the kitchen, wearing her favorite blue sweater and reading something on her laptop. Probably client reports. Her consulting practice had grown to include 12 divorced women across the Denver metro area, helping them rebuild their financial lives from scratch. She looked up as Raymond approached the glass. For a moment, they just stared at each other through that transparent barrier. Him on the outside looking in, her safe and warm in the home she'd built with her own hands in mind. Raymond raised his hand, maybe to knock or wave. Mom watched him do it. Then she looked down at her laptop and went back to reading. She didn't get up. Didn't motion him in. Didn't even shake her head no. She just continued with her work, as if he wasn't there. Raymond stood there for a full 2 minutes, his breath fogging the glass in the mountain cold. Then he turned around and walked back to me, his shoulders sagging. She won't see me. She saw you. She just doesn't want to hear you. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about fair? Mom lived in a 400-square-foot studio apartment with a bathroom so small she couldn't fully extend her arms. She ate ramen noodles for dinner so she could save money to invest. She worked 60-hour weeks while taking online courses at night to build her business. And you called her homeless at Thanksgiving dinner because it got a laugh. Raymond flinched like I'd hit him. I didn't know she was struggling that much. You didn't want to know. There's a difference. He looked back at the house one more time, then at his BMW, then at me. What do I do now? Nothing. You do nothing. You go home to your mansion and your inherited business and your son who posts everything on Instagram, and you leave us alone. Anders, please. Some apologies need to stay on the other side of the door, Uncle Raymond. He opened his mouth to say something else, then closed it. Got in his car and drove away, the engine echoing off the mountains until it faded into silence. I found Mom in the kitchen, still reading her laptop. She looked up when I came in. How long was he out there? She asked. About 5 minutes total. You saw the whole thing. She nodded. I've been practicing that moment for 5 years, wondering what I'd do if he ever showed up here wanting forgiveness. And? Turns out I don't need to forgive him. I just need to not let him in. She closed the laptop and looked out at the lake, where the afternoon sun was turning the water gold. This house isn't about him, honey. It never was. We built it for us. My phone buzzed with a text from my boss at the property management company. Need to talk Monday. Saw the social media posts about your LLC. Potential conflict of interest. I showed Mom the message. She sighed. Success has a way of creating new problems, doesn't it? Worth it, though. Yes, but Anders? She turned to face me fully. I need you to know something. All those years of staying quiet, not defending ourselves to Raymond and the others, that wasn't dignity. That was just postponing this conversation. What do you mean? I mean, we could have told them we were building something, could have shared our progress, our wins. Instead, we let them think we were failing because it felt safer than risking their judgment again. I thought about that. About all the family dinners we'd skipped, the group chats we'd ignored, the distance we'd created to protect ourselves. Do you regret it? No. But I wonder sometimes what would have happened if we'd trusted ourselves enough to be honest about our success as it was happening, instead of hiding it until it exploded on Instagram. That evening, Nora came over for dinner like she did most Sundays. She'd moved into the guest house 6 months ago, saving money while she finished her master's degree in social work. So, she said, cutting into the salmon I'd grilled on our deck overlooking the lake, the family group chat is absolutely losing its mind. Good losing it or bad losing it? Both. Grandma's mad that you've been keeping secrets. Aunt Patricia is asking if Mom needs financial advice. Cousin Jessica wants to know if you're hiring. And Dad? She paused, fork halfway to her mouth. What about Dad? He's been silent since this morning. That's not like him. Our father lived in Arizona now, had remarried, and started a new family after the divorce. He and Raymond had their own complicated relationship, brothers who'd grown up competing over everything, including who could be more successful. Think he'll call? Mom asked. Probably. He'll want to know if this makes him look bad somehow. We ate in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun set over the mountains. This was my favorite time of day in the house, when the light turned everything golden and the lake became a perfect mirror. Anders, Nora said eventually, do you think we did the right thing, building all this in secret? We didn't build it in secret. We just didn't advertise it. There's a difference? I thought about Raymond standing outside the glass, looking in at a life he'd never imagined we could create. About Theo's shock when he realized the poor relatives owned more property than his father. About my boss questioning whether I'd been honest about my outside business interests. Maybe not, I admitted. Maybe silence is just another kind of lie. Mom reached over and squeezed my hand. The important thing is we built it together. Everything else is just noise. But as I looked out at our reflection in the darkening windows, 3 people who'd learned to trust each other more than the world outside, I wondered if the noise was about to get a lot louder. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was local. Anders Beck? This is Jennifer Martinez from Channel 7 News. We'd love to do a feature story about your family's real estate success. Could we schedule an interview? I showed the message to Mom and Nora. Mom laughed, but it wasn't entirely happy. Well, she said, I guess our quiet life just got a lot less quiet. Outside, the lake reflected the first stars, and I realized that sometimes the thing you build to protect yourself becomes the very thing that exposes you to the world.